Looks like we have a good amount of folks. So with that, I just want to welcome everyone. On behalf of ECMC's Education Impact Fund, I'm Steve Deutsch. We're thrilled to host this fall learning series alongside our partners at Avalanche VC. At EIF, for Education Impact Fund, our mission is to improve access and outcomes for underserved learners and workers by investing in and partnering with mission-aligned early and growth stage companies. As I mentioned, we're excited to partner with our friends at Avalanche, a firm dedicated to investing in pre-seed companies that are reshaping how people learn, earn, and own. We're excited to present today's session, which focuses on a crucial topic for any startup: product market fit, often referenced but frequently misunderstood. And we're incredibly fortunate to have Rob Snyder with us today. Rob is a seasoned B2B founder who has successfully navigated this journey multiple times, taking dozens, if not hundreds at this point, of startups from 0 to a million in ARR, and makes them an invaluable resource for anyone building in this space. And his expertise extends beyond his own ventures. He actively shares his insights, product market fit specifically, through writing, boot camps, and mentorship. And our goal for today is to provide founders with tactical strategies on how to find this elusive product market fit. So with that, let's dive right in. Rob, we're all eager to hear your perspective. Product market fits, the holy grail of startups. Everyone chases it, but few truly achieve it. So what does it really mean?
Let's do it. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. As you will see in my background, I'm a former consultant, which means everything has to be on slides. So we got slides, but I can also see the chat. What I'd ask is, first, feel free to type an intro to who you are. That'd be awesome. Second, as I go through this, feel free to ask questions in the chat. This is hopefully going to take shape into something coherent that turns into a book, which is due to publishers in March, and I have not gotten very far on. So this will be really helpful in both directions if we do this well, if you collaborate with me here. Who the hell am I? As Steve mentioned, Rob Snyder. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I am apparently now a LinkedIn guy. My background is I worked at McKinsey, then went to Harvard Business School, then raised some money for a venture-backed B2B startup, then got punched in the face for 2 years trying to find product market fit. And then, even stranger, we went 0 to 4 million ARR in the next 2 years, and it operated totally differently than how I thought it was supposed to operate. So I've been trying to figure out how this stage actually works versus how we were taught it works. And doing that, I brought a ton of startups, like now well over a dozen, from 0 to a million ARR, usually B2B startups in all sorts of industries, but I've also done B2C, like robotic stuff, a lot of interesting things there. Now you can check out my website. I also am a co-founder of a bootstrapped B2B software company. Feel free to check that out. I'll run you through some of the slides I've used to talk through product market fit. I do a free newsletter on product market fit too, so you can sign up there. In today's session, I wanted to pull together the presentation that I wish someone had given me when I was just starting out. I talk to a lot of serial founders who see this and are like, wow, I wish somebody had told me this 10 years ago. So the goals of this session are so that getting to product market fit and getting customers to say hell yes consistently isn't some vague, abstract, unactionable concept that like only exists in like 2 Paul Graham blog posts. And second, that you have something very clear you can do in the next 24 hours that can help you start on that path, or kind of like slightly tweak your approach that you're currently taking. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Let's do it. Hell yeah. Okay, so agenda for today. First is, why is this so hard? Second, what is demand? A new way to think about product market fit and putting this into practice. Please do ask questions in the chat too. Mindy, feel free to jump out and interrupt at any point. Plenty of time for Q&A. Okay, so why is this so hard? I want to walk you through the first 2 years of my startup journey. This is what I often hear from very smart founders like yourselves. We go through some ideation exercises, try to see into the future, figure out what markets we should target. We map our assumptions, do a bunch of validation planning to say, here's how we're going to validate that we have product market fit, that we're building the right thing. We run experiments. We do tons of customer interviews. I have heard of people, I've seen spreadsheets documenting 300 customer interviews. We have customers rank their pain points so we know exactly what we need to solve for. We build our product very thoughtfully, our MVP, alongside design partners, and then we try to start selling it. And at this point, something goes wrong. It doesn't quite work like all of the research we had done up until then had suggested. So sometimes we hire professional sellers and marketers, but ultimately we find that it's really hard to sell. We're growing slow and painfully. It feels like pulling teeth and twisting arms to get anybody to buy anything. As a result, we're all product people, so we default to building more product and it still doesn't work. And so at this point, we enter pivot hell and life sucks. Curious in the chat, why do we think this happens, even to very smart founders? Lack of market knowledge, interesting. Solving our own problems that we wish other people had, maybe. Timing, yeah. We like building the structural process. You just punched me in the soul, Omar. I love building. I don't like someone telling me they don't like what I'm building. And acts of God, I love that. Scared of what we might find. Yeah, Steve, totally. I'll show you what it feels like. This is what my brain felt like for 2 years when things don't work. I don't know if any of these particularly resonate with you, but all of them hurt me to look at. If you haven't thought any of these yet, God bless you. You will at some point, unfortunately, or for better or worse. This is what I call the pain cave. It's when it's not quite working. We're not hitting that hockey stick growth, and it's hard to know why. At the root of this, it's really hard because there are infinite possible answers to a variety of questions. Like, why isn't it quite working? Why aren't we growing super fast? What are all the things that could possibly work? Who could we serve? What messaging could we use? What growth tactics should we try out? What advice should we listen to? Because there are infinite answers to all of these, I also didn't know if I was one word away from product market fit or if I was totally backwards in the wrong country. I want to show you my path out of this because it's really weird. And I've heard basically the same story from everybody that I've talked to who has been in the pain cave and gotten out. Stuck for 2 years, doing all the things right. Here's what coming out looked like. From 0 to 100K ARR, I gave away all of my fancy theories and asked, what would you pay me to help you accomplish? The product at this stage was me in a spreadsheet. We had a 3-slide sales deck. Our first few customers churned hard, and then over time, a little bit less. We had no product roadmap or anything. There was an engineer watching me on Zoom for 10 hours a day, shipping automations in these spreadsheets so that I would stay alive. From 100K to 1 million ARR, the product was automated. Customers did not have a login to it though, still in a spreadsheet, which is weird. But they thanked us for not having to log into some software. I spent my time onboarding customers one-on-one in Zoom calls basically all day, every day for months. From 1 to 4 million ARR, I kept hearing this. I hate that I'm paying you for this product. But then they would say, I wish I could pay you for this other thing. So we built that other thing. It worked really well. And we got 60% of revenue from word of mouth referrals. It felt like people bought and we didn't sell. And despite this, our product was still one ugly screen.
Hey, Rob, can you provide a little more context on, was this an amalgamation of companies? Was this your first company? What did it actually do? What industry?
Yeah, this was my first company. We were trying to sell into a bunch of different industries. The only one that fit were restaurants. They said, we will pay you to help us figure out how to hire employees. I downloaded a spreadsheet of applicants who had previously applied but hadn't been hired and their former employees. I uploaded them into a texting software and texted each one to see if they wanted to come back and work for them. And that's what this product was. Everyone kept saying, I don't want to pay you for this. I would much rather pay you to retain the employees I already have. And so we built a tool that plugged into their HR system that sent check-in messages to their new hires and employees.
Let's keep going.
So generalizing this, everyone's path out of the pain cave, I've now talked with like 1,000 entrepreneurs about this. Here's what we think the path is. Build a compelling product vision and MVP, evangelize it, find design partners, explore different market segments to figure out which one is the right one for us to sell into, and then do more research and validation to build conviction that we're right. What seems to actually work is not to try to convince people they should want our product, not to try to evangelize it. It's to find actual demand. Instead of exploring a bunch of different potential options that we could possibly sell to, it seems to work where we find one hell yes customer and try to repeat their case study. And the process, our business kind of morphs and transforms as we try to do that. Instead of a bunch of research, selling to learn as quickly as possible and not trusting research or assuming that we can know a ton in advance without selling. So what we're going to do now is run through each of these in a little bit more detail. But I want to leave you with this, my favorite quote. A students, like most people here, don't start until they have the answer. D students are more successful in startups at the early stage. They start because they know they don't have the answer. That is a very important one to keep in mind.
Hey, Rob, one quick question on there. You often hear about this sequencing of finding product market fit and sell before you build, as opposed to traditionally build, then sell. When you talk about what works, what level of product do you actually need, or what have you found works best?
I found that the MVP for every startup is a case study. That theoretical case study here, it's something that you need to be able to deliver with product, with elbow grease, but the MVP is the case study. You can put it into slides, you can put it in a spreadsheet, but it's this customer had to accomplish X, Y, Z. Here's how we helped. Here's what we specifically did to get them to accomplish their big goal or big project. And here's what it cost.
Yeah, and I think that's really important framing, which to your point, we'll get into more later. But yeah, the idea of a case study as an MVP is a really different way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sweet. So demand is a super important concept here. How do you find demand? When you find real demand, you have a situation like I had where people were pulling the product out of my hands and they put up with its many flaws. When you don't find demand, it feels like you're pushing and persuading, and then people wind up ghosting you a lot. And then this happens no matter how good you are at sales, no matter how technically brilliant your product is, no matter your objective ROI or how fancy your marketing is or how much money you've raised. The question though, for you, what is demand? I'd love to see what you write, and then I have a multiple choice thing. What is demand? What they're looking for and willing to pay for. A need that someone is willing to pay you to solve. A need so bad they'll spend money to fix or at least mitigate it. Problems waiting to be solved. Validated need for a solution. Okay, let's cast our vote. Are any of these right? Which of these would you say it is most close to? D, B, C, D. Sure. Can we take someone off mute to explain? Does anyone want to explain why they chose what they chose? Is that allowed?
Mindy, can we do that? Anyone raising their hand?
If you want to volunteer in the chat, I can unmute you.
Curious. We got a bunch of different answers.
But Louis, thank you. We have a volunteer. And Steve.
Eric, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. So I chose D. I don't think the value prop is something that humans think about. I think it's something that investors think about and product people think about. I can't think of the last time I bought a product and told my wife, oh my gosh, the value prop is just 10x the last product. So maybe I might be dumbing it down a bit on that one. And then B, I don't actually think it needs to be a big problem or a big pain point. I just think it needs to be a deep one. Maybe the qualifier of big there is what threw me off. I would say B is much more correct than A. If I'm over reading into the qualifier of big, ultimately it's a problem and a pain point that they're willing to pay you to solve. And I think sometimes, certainly some of us have seen this, those of us who tend to use technology early on, like right now, a lot of what's going on with Gen AI, yeah, you don't even realize how big the problem is when you first start using a solution to something. And then you later on realize how large it was. And first time listener, first time caller, thanks for taking me.
I think Steve had picked C. I'm curious, could we take Steve off mute?
Hey, Rob, I said C because my recent experience has been that there has to be a big enough problem that they're willing to pay for it. But also, if they have a current solution, I've run into this resistance to change. Like humans are lazy and don't want to do, just the switching cost of changing their current solution. If it's not 10x, it's greatly better, right? And so unless it's clear, like, oh my God, we're already doing this, but this is so much better. If it doesn't have that aha moment, it's like, well, it's going to take a lot of internal pressure. I got to talk to a lot of stakeholders. So that's why I chose C.
And super helpful. Thank you both for coming off mute. That was amazing. What I've found is that it's hard to make any of these like I've tried to put these definitions into practice for demand. A lot of them tend to fall down. So I wind up with D first, just because nobody wants my product. I just have to embrace that. What I found is that even if we find a 10 out of 10 pain points that people talk about, right? Life is generally a series of pain points that we really don't do anything about. I've had companies that have had serious interviews with people saying they had 10 out of 10 pain points consistently, and they wound up not buying, even when they said they were. Big problems, painful problem, whatever, many of these are never prioritized. Even if people are excited about our product, I've been excited about products I've never bought. And as we talked about with ROI, right? There's so many high ROI things we could do for our businesses that we just don't prioritize. And so what I've realized with these things, they're actually really useful to describe why people bought some successful product that exists in past tense. They're descriptive, but they're not predictive. So I've had to come up with a way to predict demand. This has been super helpful to a lot of different startups. I'm going to do this in two parts. One is I'm just going to try to define demand as distinct from supply so you can create that space in your brain. And then I'll explain a model for thinking about demand and why people buy products. What is demand? I found it's really helpful to separate demand and supply. On the supply side, supply is everything we control. It's our product, marketing, messaging, go-to-market activities, etc. Demand is outside of what we control. It happens out there in the world. It happens in our customers' worlds. Why do they do anything? What do they need to accomplish? Why do they choose to accomplish that thing versus a million other things? What options do they consider when they need to accomplish it? And what do they value? What do they not value? So we assume that demand makes our supply relevant. Here's a way to think about demand and make it a little more concrete. I imagine everybody has a to-do list in their brain. And that to-do list has a million things. At any one point, you can only prioritize one project. So those million compete for that one slot. What is the one thing I'm going to prioritize at this particular point in time? Once that project is on your critical path, you figure out how to do it. I need to get SOC 2 compliant, right? Now that's on our critical path. How do we do that? Do we buy something? Do we hire someone? What do we do there? Because demand is this thing we don't control. It's not to convince somebody that they should prioritize a project or that they should conjure up some new project on their to-do list. They have enough on their to-do list. Instead, our job is to figure out which project on their to-do list our product fits into and when that project is on their critical path. If we do this, then we have a predictive model for when people buy. I'm going to walk through an example of this and switching from supply side thinking to demand side thinking. So, friend's company called MoocTest, they do QA automation software. When you ship software to production, you want to test it first. The way they thought about what they were selling, they started on the supply side, right? So they said, okay, here's the product that we have. Here's what's unique about it. We have a QA testing automation software. What's unique about it, this was like a couple years ago, so way more unique then. We use AI, which helps you test faster than any other software out there. And so what we think customers want is the fastest QA automation software on earth. What they found was that this didn't work. They were trying to sell this for $200 a month per customer. It took like 6 months for the average sales cycle, which is not good. People weren't willing to pay any more than that. They had to force their customers to use it after they paid too. This is the typical way we approach figuring out what customers demand. Like, here's what we think they want. The other frame of this is to say, okay, we're going to start in the same place. We have QA testing automation software. But instead say, when customers buy it, what is the project on their Trello board? When we asked that question, what we realized was the buyer's project was, get this dumb thing off of my plate and off my mind. I don't want to have to think about this at all. I just want to get back to building for customers. When we changed what they were selling, how we described it, from the fastest QA automation software on earth to the AI-powered thing that takes QA off your plate and off your mind, they were able to 20x their price. So they went from $200 a month to $4,000 a month because customers forced them to. They literally didn't believe that this could be done at $200 a month. Their sales cycles went from 6 months to 1 month. They went from 10K ARR to $1 million ARR in 12 months. Customers were happier post-sale with this differentiated offering. So this captures what demand really is. Yeah, I see a question from Matt. This shift, messaging seen in the landing page, cold emails, all of the above. This shift of messaging is the most upstream thing in their business. This is a foundation, almost like a strategy shift, and it comes through in everything they do.
Is it fair, Rob? We're all very familiar with jobs to be done. And when you're talking about demand, that it seems to align with a lot of those concepts. Is that a fair summation here, or are there important distinctions to make relative to jobs to be done? I'm close with Bob Moesta, who is one of the two people behind Jobs to be Done with Clay Christensen. I think this is an iteration on Jobs to be Done. I always found that Jobs to be Done made sense in theory and it was really hard to implement in practice. So instead of thinking about jobs to be done, that concept, just think like, what is the project on their to-do list in their brain? And how do I fit into that better? Cool. All right. Keep rolling. Steve, any other questions you wanted to call out? Or No, this is great. Let's keep rolling.
Oh, yeah. All right, keep rolling. Okay, so how do we think about product market fit? The product market fit challenge that I often see is that there are so many different markets, niches, personas, et cetera. Eventually, we might need to serve all of those to become a big company. But what do we do? Because it seems like making any one thing work is really hard. It seems impossible to make many things work at once. So how do we figure this out? What I've realized is we typically have the wrong way of thinking about how the mechanics of product market fit work. And so, yeah, this is then a lot more helpful for me. So the way I think about product market fit is replicating one hell yes customer's case study. We basically figure out on the demand side, what were they trying to accomplish? What was their project? On supply side, what did we offer? We start with one. Find one hell yes and replicate that. And as we try to replicate that, the case study will evolve in time because we learn things, or we can add additional case studies. The case study is a very simple story from the customer's point of view, where she is the protagonist, the hero of the story, not us. And, what did she need to accomplish? What was the project? Why this versus the million other projects she could have prioritized? What options did she consider? Why did she choose us? How did we help her? And what did she buy? It's like very, very simple. And when you have this, it kind of turns into, here's my framework for it. Right? Very simple. What's the project? Why is it on the critical path? What options did they consider? What are the results? How did they get there and what do they buy? You can actually take this and use this as all of your collateral. This is actually MoocTest's sales stack that got them from 0 to $1 million ARR. Here's the project people were considering when they talked to us. How are you different? Here's why it was on this person's critical path. How are you different from that? Here's the options they considered and how they thought about those. How are you thinking about your options? Here's the results they got. Is that what you want? Here's how we plugged in and helped them. How would you want it to be different? Here's what they bought. How would you think about this different? Yeah. One case study, can use it everywhere. On your landing page, your sales deck, everything. I think of the case study as something even more foundational, right? It determines basically everything about your business. It determines who do you compete with? Like, who are the other options on the demand side? What pricing makes sense? We could talk about that if you're interested. Who's your target customer? What does your product need to be? What do customers expect post-sale when they buy? How big is your addressable market? And how fast can you grow? So yeah, I view it as a blueprint. I view it as the most upstream thing in our business. Startups are basically just case study replication engines.
One question we got, and tell me if you want to hit this downstream, but it's hard to figure out who the stakeholders and decision makers are. So it's one thing if you have the meeting, can present the case study, maybe step one is figuring out who the target decision maker or stakeholder is.
Yeah, 100%. So the case study is not from an organizational perspective. It's not, here's one company. It's, here's one person. Here's the person who actually had to accomplish a thing in that company and how we helped them. I tend to do it at the buyer level. Very hard to do this anywhere else. Our buyer, our champion, had to accomplish one specific project, and here's how we helped them accomplish that. Does that answer your question, Steve? Did we lose Steve or did we lose me? Oh,
Sorry, I cut out there, but no, appreciate you addressing it sounds like we have a few questions and comments around kind of specificity of target customer and pricing, which I think we could touch on later.
totally. Okay, I actually had a question slide here. Do we want to pause here for questions, or do we want to get through the example of how I use this for my startup?
Matt has a question around target customer and pricing. Let me know if it makes sense to hit now or after you get through the.
Why don't we take Matt off mute to explain a little more?
Yeah, Mindy, can you help us out? Or Matt, you open to that?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, love to hear your thoughts on how specific you think we should get on target customers, and obviously not universal truths, but broad strokes. Thoughts on pricing. Do you go low to get volume and get your foot in the door quickly for that first customer? How do you think about setting a price? Thanks.
Yeah, for first customers, I just want them to pay something generally. I don't care that I've optimized the price. I just want them to pay something. That's how I think early customers tend to work. And for them, I would think of making the case study specific for them in that case. And so eventually you're going to kind of generalize it, but you want to make something perfect fit for them. I think, Matt. Does that make sense, Matt?
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions on this? What I'll do after this is I'll show you the slides that I use and how I walk through them for my startup. So what I found is you can show customers this case study, and when not quite right, when they have objections and questions, you can iterate on the case study. And that's actually how you find product market fit. You get the case study to hell yes, and you know exactly who you need to show it to. And they say hell yes every time you show it to them and they buy. I'm like, that's essentially what product market fit is and how it works.
One more tactical question then. Where do you first use the case study? Is it on that first call with the buyer? Do you use it to help you get the meeting, or like given some of the questioning here, you don't want to presume too much? When do you first unveil this?
So the way I get first meetings is by literally any means necessary. Usually when I'm early, I have no idea what my case study should be. I need to talk to people about it before sending out cold outreach. I will send messages to people saying, hey, I'm looking for advisors. I'm looking for feedback. I have no idea if this is relevant to you or not. Would love to chat. Would you be open to it? Then I show them the case study. I'm like, listen, I don't know that this is fit for you. I would like to eventually sell to you, but I'd love for you to say how you're different from this case study that we've built, right? First call I use as a case study call in a sales process. You ask a couple of questions leading into it so that you don't pull up a case study and they're like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. You generally use the case study to guide discovery throughout the conversation. It structures the conversation well. What do you need to accomplish and why? What options are you considering? What results are you looking for? These are good discovery questions and a good discovery structure.
Perfect. Love it. And I think people talk about customer discovery all the time. And to your earlier points, I think it often leads to dead ends and platitudes. And I think having a framework to conduct customer discovery where you're asking real questions that get to real answers is critical.
What I find is with customer discovery, we just wind up looking for pain points and problems and we can find them, but that doesn't lead to projects. That doesn't lead to real demand. And so we wind up getting more confused than less. And so that's really, really hard. Mindy says we also have a question from Lewis in the Q&A poll. I don't know if I can see the Q&A poll.
All right, let me fire it off for you. Going back to your point on some language being hindsight, have you used this framework to develop or consult with groups to launch new products or companies? I am thinking such as venture studios.
Yeah, totally. Yes. I've used this in B2C, B2B, everywhere from we don't actually have an idea of what we're building and just want to test out ideas on people and see if they'll buy them and learn and like start iterating on that, to tens of millions of ARR companies where they're having specific problems like churn or whatever, and they're trying to figure out like, okay, who do we actually want to serve? I actually think of the case study as the base layer for every startup, like the foundation for every company. Our business is just a system to replicate case studies. So, great question, Luis. I want to show you how to put it into practice and then, plenty of time for Q&A. The case study actually leads to a different kind of sales. I basically show the case study to customers and ask them, how are you different from this case study? Is this case study what you want? What this does is it doesn't feel like a sales call. It's enjoyable for both of us. It feels like we're both sitting on the same side of the table looking at a case study versus I'm on one side of the table trying to convince them they should buy from me. It often leads to sales, which is also nice. And it also helps me find product market fit. But unfortunately, it does not let me lecture them about how I think their world should work and all of their pain points. So, I make that trade-off every day. So my startup for next slides, I'm going to walk you through the actual deck I use for selling. And I use this deck to figure out what we were selling and building. You can see the website here. The website is not good, but I'm basically bootstrapping an infrastructure security startup. The value prop is like, get your AWS account SOC 2 compliant in minutes, not months. I've used this case study to help me figure out what buyers' demand really is and how to describe my product in a way they don't hate, to help me pull out their objections so that I can redesign around that. The way I've actually done this, if this is probably useful, I didn't have a website for our first couple of customers. I just used these slides. Based on these slides, I figured out what to do with the website. Okay, so slide 1 is the project and the context. The goal is, how do we get SOC 2 ready ASAP without wasting engineering effort? Here's the context. Here's why this is important. We need to have our SOC 2 on it, but we're struggling with the amount of work. We need this done yesterday. We're going through vendor reviews. I show this to people. I'm like, okay, tell me, how are you different from this? Sounds like you're somewhere in your SOC 2 process. If you're not familiar with what SOC 2 is, it's like enterprise grade compliance for software companies. You often need it to sell to big companies. We need to get this compliance certification, but we're spending a lot of engineering effort. So it sounds like you're trying to accomplish this. You also don't want to waste a lot of engineering effort. Here's what I've typically heard at this stage. Tell me how you're different. Which ones of these are you considering? Pausing on SOC 2, just not doing this if you don't have to, investing the time and money in a refactoring project, or maybe even getting a consultant, or solving this with software. Have you considered this latter option? Usually it's like, yeah, no, we didn't know we could do this with software. Happy to show you how we've helped a company just like you. Right. Before using us, this startup was not ready for SOC 2. Their deployment process, their AWS account, they were getting all of these things, all of these like lights were red in their compliance software. And so they estimated it would take 2 months of work and $25K from consultants. With us, here's how we fit in. We built a firewall on their AWS account, built a CI/CD to push their software into, and it turned their lights green in a few minutes, not without changing their development process or code base. How is that different from how you would want this to work? And then usually we get questions here, and then it's just pricing. Like, okay, for $100 a month, you're able to do blah, 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 blah. So you can see along the top here, I've been going through the case study slides. As I have a conversation in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what's the shape of their project and how can we fit into that? And is this a good fit for them? And essentially, this has taken a ton of iterations. This has gone through 5 major overhauls and probably 20 smaller overhauls as well. And so what I'll leave you with is this. I'll give a quick summary here and then plenty of time for questions. One is trying to find demand and design our supply around that demand. Create one case study for a hell yes customer. Use the case study for sales and debugging your path to product market fit. Team can share these with you, but there's a template of a spreadsheet that a lot of startups have used to write out what they think their case study is, and my actual slides that you can copy and use for your own decks. So that's what I got for you here. What questions can I help with?
Well, thank you for sharing your own personal journey and actual sales collateral. I think that really drives home the point. As folks are populating some Q&A here, one question I have off the bat is, I think this is a really useful tool. I think I have a much better understanding what product market fit actually means and how you could test for it. What's your experience? What's the best way to know when you have it? It goes back to the hell yes customer and replicating that. But how do you measure it? How have you measured it? How would you recommend startups measuring it? Because I think one of the questions going through my head is like, you have one case study and you're trying to replicate it. Like, when do you know when it's time to pivot? I'm sure it's a feeling you have, but I'm curious, like, how do you actually measure it and know when you have it?
Okay. So a couple things here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a couple things. Give me 1 second. Let's see. I think that's that one. Okay. So here we go. Sharing a new screen. Let's see if this works. Okay. So I built something that is like a product market fit score here. If we look at our business as a system for replicating case studies, we can pull all of the lessons from how to measure systems into figuring out what to measure in our business and where to focus. And so what I've created here is a set of metrics that actually matter. Are we seeing this screen, by the way?
Yeah, we're seeing it.
Okay, cool. So a couple of things I look into. How many first conversations are we having per week with potential customers? If we don't have many of those, it's just hard to learn anything. Then out of 10 first meetings, how many of those turn into real potential customers? Of 10 real potential deals, how many turn into actual customers? Of those, how many turn to hell yes? How many different kinds of case studies are we replicating, and how does sales feel? And so this is, I think, the North Star for everyone, is to try to get this score as high as possible, and it's out of 100. That's what I found. Here it is. Here's the milestones that actually matter when in your first million ARR. Scheduling X number of sales calls per week, Milestone 2, 1 paying customer, 5 paying customers, one of which is a hell yes post sale. We kind of iteratively get to this.
As a numbers guy, I love the score you're building. And Luis had a great question in the chat. Are you familiar with Superhuman's 40% product market fit rule?
It's
Curious your thoughts. Is that valid?
So that is,
And Rob, if you don't mind, maybe just providing some context for the other listeners on what it is.
yeah. So basically, Superhuman's approach, they're an email provider, and their approach says, okay, we have product market fit. If 40% of people who are our users would be very disappointed if we no longer existed, if we took it away from them. I think it's a fine thing, but then you ask a couple questions like, why 40%? Why is that the right thing? If people would be very disappointed if we took this away, like, will they actually churn? That doesn't actually tell me whether they'll churn or not. So I actually prefer Stage 2 Capital's description of product market fit. The Science of Scaling from Mark Roberge talks about product market fit as a certain percentage of customers hitting a leading indicator that they will renew. That matters to me a lot more than 40% of people who would be sad if we no longer existed. Do you believe that the 40% rule applies more to B2C than B2B products? Like, yeah, it kind of more applies to a situation where you have a really, really high volume of people coming through, and you're okay if only 40% of people would not be happy if you went away. In the B2B business, you should have like 95% customer retention. That 40% rule is not super helpful.
Rob, not sure if you could see these, but some good follow-ups. Isn't your answer simply retention rate is the litmus test for product market fit?
Retention rate is sort of. Yes, retention is the ultimate thing. Customer retention is the ultimate thing. That is, if I could only measure one thing, customer retention, renewal, upsell, net revenue retention, really important, and decomposing that. Stage 2's point is a little bit like retention is a lagging indicator. Stage 2's point is that if we can find a leading indicator of customer retention and focus on driving customers to that, we know they will renew without having to wait and be surprised. Slack's, for example, was like, we know that when people send X number of messages, they will renew. They didn't have to wait for that renewal, but renewal is what matters. If you're a one-time purchase business, repeat purchases are what matter.
And then one other follow-up, this goes back to stakeholder engagement and who to target. How do you find that one person in the company to discuss this case study with? Should you go for the typical decision makers, aka founders, leads, or are there individuals you suggest to get that hell yes?
I find that going to somebody who can't buy and has to convince other people to buy makes it really hard to get somebody to buy. What I tend to do is try to find a buyer, somebody who could actually buy this and have the case study be of them, because then there's just fewer moving parts. If you sell to somebody who is more junior in the organization, you can get them to say yes. And they're like, cool, I don't even have a corporate credit card. I can't do anything for you. I have to go convince my boss that they should buy this thing. And then there's a million reasons why they're not going to want to go convince their boss. And then you have to probably go and pitch to their boss, which requires a totally different case study than the one that worked for the junior level employee. So, in summary, sell to people who can buy.
And find those people by any means necessary.
The goal is I want to talk to people who have demand or they won't have demand. I have no control over that. So my goal is just to talk to as many people as possible in a week who could potentially have demand. If they have demand, cool. Do you want to hear how I've helped a couple companies just like you? You want to see a case study? Great. Let me show you, right? Then they will pull for it. If they don't have demand, nothing I can do will change that.
Great. Well, this has been fantastic. Rob, Well, let's see. One more question if we have time. Getting the 5 meetings a week is a problem. What's your best method to get over that hurdle?
Um, what I've found is that the reason we don't get 5 meetings a week is usually because we don't do outreach. Everyone has to do outreach. Required. Second, our outreach sounds like a salesperson. It has 2 downsides. One is nobody wants to get a sales message in their inbox. And 2 is at this stage, you tend to not know what you're selling. And so it's really hard for a sales message to work. Any sort of outreach you do at this stage should be something that only a founder could send to only this kind of person. If you approach messaging from that point of view and think, what's in it for them? I've seen people say, I'm looking to build an advisory network, right? And then you can see from there, it just tends to not work if you're doing salesy outreach.
Do you have like a benchmark, internal or otherwise, you use for response rates to that cold outreach?
Yes, it depends on which channel. So email is hard. LinkedIn, you can shoot for like a 30 to 40% acceptance rate on LinkedIn, and then like a 10 to 15% response rate on the total number of connection requests you send out. And that math, you get to like 10 a week. I know people who are at like 20 a week. So it's just doable. You just like get on sales pitch mode in your emails and messages, and it's a lot easier than anything.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for your time. We know you're a busy guy. The one thing I'll just state is we understand this is an education and workforce audience, building in that space. And while we certainly appreciate the distinct differences when it comes to budget constraints, decision-making processes, regulatory and compliance requirements in education and workforce, the core principles of finding product market fit remain the same. To Rob's credit, he's doing this as well as anyone. We've been getting a lot of great chats, and the retention rate on this webinar speaks for itself. Thank you, Rob. Please reach out to myself or Caitlin at the Avalanche team, or Rob if there's any follow-up questions, and join us next week for our session on financial modeling essentials. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, take care.